What if a single word could destroy your honor, strip you of your legal rights, and condemn you to a fate worse than death? Among the Norse, that word was argr, a term so devastating, so loaded with contempt, that to be labeled with it was akin to social annihilation. In Viking society, masculinity was not just a cultural expectation, it was the core of one's legal, social, and spiritual standing. To be argr, translated roughly as unmanly, effeminate, or morally deviant, was not merely an insult. It was a formal accusation, and in the Norse legal codes, such as the Icelandic Grágás, it held devastating consequences. The term implied behaviors considered the direct antithesis of Norse masculine ideals, cowardice, adopting socially passive roles in same-gender relations, or the use of sorcery sever, which though widely practiced by women, was viewed as shameful and emasculating for men. According to Snorri Sturluson, in the Ynglinga saga, even the god Odin was criticized for using sever, with the comment that it was so unmanly that men could not deal with it without shame. To call a man argr was no passing insult. It was a legally actionable accusation known as a knee, a deeply dishonorable slur. If challenged, the accused had to defend his manhood through skóggangr, a ritual duel. Failure to respond was taken as admission of guilt, and the consequences were severe. In Norse law, especially in Iceland during the 10th and 11th centuries, an uncontested argr accusation could result in full outlawry, the harshest form of legal punishment. This was not merely exile. It was a death sentence delivered by society itself. The accused would lose all protection under the law and become fair game for anyone to kill without consequence. The dishonor extended beyond the individual. It could taint one's entire bloodline. Families distanced themselves from accused ergi men, for fear of being stained by association. These men were viewed as morally polluted, corrupted in their soul, and unfit to live among honorable warriors. In Viking culture, manhood was sacred, and the label argr was not just shame, it was destruction. Skóggangr, sent into the forest to die. In Viking law, few punishments were as unforgiving as skóggangr, literally meaning going into the forest. But this was no poetic exile. It was a calculated form of social and legal execution. To be sentenced to skóggangr meant complete removal from the human world, stripped of rights, stripped of kinship, and left to perish beyond the boundaries of society. This punishment, recorded in the Grágás, Iceland's medieval legal code, was reserved for the most serious violations, manslaughter without compensation, sorcery, and as seen before, being deemed argr if the charge went undefended. It rendered a man an outlawr, an outlaw. Outlawry came in two forms, lesser outlawry fjorbogsgar, lasting 3 years, and full outlawry skóggangr, which was permanent. The former allowed a man to return after his term, provided he committed no crimes in exile. The latter offered no such mercy. A man sentenced to skóggangr had to leave all settlements and inhabited areas. He was denied sanctuary in any household, forbidden from receiving aid from family or friends. He had no right to shelter, food, fire, or protection. Nor was he permitted to trade or interact with society in any form. If he attempted to return or was caught within civilized boundaries, anyone could kill him without legal repercussion. He could not attend festivals, make sacrifices, or seek justice. He had become ningr, a dishonored man, devoid of drengskapr, the Norse concept of honorable manhood. The sagas offer haunting glimpses into this punishment. In Grégás saga, the outlaw Grétar Asmundarson is condemned to the wilderness, where he survives for years in harsh isolation. His fate becomes a slow unraveling of mind, of body, of soul. Few survived long in this state. The Norse landscape was harsh, dense woods, unforgiving winters, and wild predators. But even greater than the physical dangers was the weight of being forgotten. No rites would be performed for such a man. No songs sung. He was dead before his body perished. Declared outlaw, hunted by anyone, protected by no one. To the Vikings, manhood was sacred, defined by strength, honor, and the capacity for violence when necessary. But what happened to those men who were labeled argr, unmanly? The answer was chilling. They were declared outlaws, cast out of all human society, and made into something less than men, something to be hunted. These men were now legally outlawry, outside the law. They were not imprisoned. They were not rehabilitated. They were exposed, vulnerable, and openly marked for death. What made this punishment so horrifying was not only the legal designation. It was the deliberate, ritualized stripping of a man's humanity. A so-called unmanly man had no right to home, kin, or legacy. He became, in the words of Norse law, as a wolf in the forest, a beast without name or protection. Killing him was not a crime. It was often considered a civic duty. The legal codes were explicit. Anyone could kill an outlaw. Not only was the killer free from legal consequence, but in some cases he could claim the dead man's property. The law stated plainly, "He who kills an outlaw shall not pay wergild." For those branded argr, the moral weight was heavier still. Their supposed unmanliness, whether for practicing sorcery, adopting a socially passive role in same-gender relations, or violating gender norms, was seen as a pollution of the social order. They were a threat to the ideal of Norse masculinity and had to be eliminated, not merely removed. Erased from bloodlines, forgotten by family and clan. Among the Vikings, identity was not personal, it was ancestral. A man's worth came not only from his deeds, but from his place within his clan, his lineage, and his honor-bound kinship ties. To be called argr, unmanly, was not merely a social disgrace. It threatened to sever these ties forever. Those who bore the mark of ergi, whether by accusation or outlawry, often suffered a fate far beyond death. They were intentionally erased from the memory of their own blood. Unlike a fallen warrior, whose name would live on in sagas and stones, the ningr, the dishonored man, was left unspoken. Not forgotten by accident, but forgotten by design. In Norse culture, memory was legacy. Families proudly recited their ancestry, tracing noble bloodlines back through generations. Yet when a man was accused of unmanly behavior, particularly if the charge went unchallenged, his name was often left out of genealogies. Icelandic genealogical texts and family sagas frequently omit or truncate the lineage of such figures, reflecting a social process of deliberate erasure. This was not simply out of shame. It was self-preservation. To be descended from a man tainted by brought dishonor to the entire family. It could affect marriage prospects, land inheritance, and standing at the thing, the Norse assembly. To protect future generations, families would disavow, disown, and eventually deny the very existence of the disgraced man. For Vikings, being deemed unmanly could result not only in exile or death, but in total erasure from family, history, and legacy. A man once bound by honor could become a ghost to his own blood, remembered by none and mourned by no one. Condemning men as argr revealed the Norse urge to police honor by exile, outlawry, and oblivion, masculinity forged in cold iron. That judgment echoes when societies decide who merits protection and who may be cast out. Legends and law still yet shape gender, justice, and memory today. Which modern norms mirror Viking fear of unmanliness? Comment below with your reflections. As the Havamal warns, cattle die and kinsmen die, and so one dies oneself, but a noble name will never die, if good renown one gets.